Emeritus of APCU, and Honorable Secretary Raymond Lopez of the Department of Trade and Industry of the Philippines, Honorable Chairman Raul Lambino, the Chairman of the APCU, and Honorable President Jin Liqun, the President of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, Honorable Kong Fu, Deputy Secretary General of ASEAN, and Honorable Vice President Chen Shixin, the Vice President of the Asian Development Bank, and also Honorable Mr. Yang Zaiping, the Founding Secretary General of the Asian Financial Cooperation Association. So good afternoon to all of you. I'm very delighted to join all of you today to launch the first Manila Forum on the Philippines-China relations. At the outset, I would like to extend my warm welcome to all participants and my sincere appreciation in particular to Mr. Jin Liqun, the President of the AIIB, for being the first keynote speaker of this forum. I would also like to acknowledge the presence of colleagues and friends from the Philippine national and local government, political parties, and international organizations by gracing today's event. I would also like to thank APCU for thoughtfully organizing this forum. Jointly inaugurated by Chinese State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi and former President Arroyo last January, the Manila Forum is designated to be a new dialogue platform which aims at promoting better mutual understanding between China and the Philippines by enhancing mutual trust, prompting collaboration, and scaling down differences, with a focus on China-Philippine relations. This forum will also provide perspective on issues of the region and beyond through in-depth exchange and discussion. It is my hope that this forum could help build a network of inspiring thoughts and ideas to further strengthen China-Philippine relations, energize regional and world economy, cooperation, and address common challenges of the region and beyond. Facing the onslaught of the COVID-19 pandemic, the world economy has been mired in deep recession. The mankind has encountered multiple crises rarely seen in history. How the once in a century pandemic has changed the world, how to achieve a complete global anti-pandemic victory at an early date, how to survive and recover from the lingering recession, and what kind of approach we can take to reach the post-pandemic world. These are the questions of the time that we have to reflect on. It is just to inspire in-depth contemplation and encourage the innovative exploration over the aforesaid questions that we set the theme of this forum today as the joint hands to boost the economic recovery from COVID-19, the economic growth of China and its implication for regional economic recovery. As for China, we have spared no efforts to stretch out practical solutions to the rampaging pandemic and staggering economy. As President Xi Jinping pointed out in his special address at the World Economic Forum last January, the problems facing the world are intricate and complex. And the way out of them is through upholding multilateralism and building a community with a shared future for the mankind. In this spirit, China calls for enhanced international cooperation to fight against the pandemic and promote fair and equitable distribution of COVID-19 vaccines around the globe. We also stay committed to upholding the stable and unhindered global industrial and supply chain, and continuously building an open world and regional economy. Domestically, we worked relentlessly on both combating the pandemic and reviving economy. I'm proud to share with you that China has scored a historic or complete victory in its fight against poverty, achieving the poverty reduction goal of the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development ahead of schedule, despite the pandemic, and making significant contribution to the global poverty reduction cause. A Chinese adage reads, victory is ensured when people pool their strength. Success is secure when people put their heads together. China is keen to work closely with other countries, including the Philippines, to pave the way to achieve economic recovery and social development together. And I really look forward to your insights and suggestions in this regard. To conclude, I wish the first Manila Forum for Philippine-China relations a full success. Thank you and mabuhay.
Thank you, Ambassador Huang. To represent the Philippine government, we will now call on Trade and Industry Secretary Ramon Lopez to give his welcome remarks.
Thank you very much. Former Philippine President and Chairman Emeritus of APCU, Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, Ambassador, Your Excellency, Ambassador Wang Silian, APCU Chairman, Secretary Raul Lambino, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank President Jin Dikyun, Deputy Secretary General of ASEAN, Kung Poa, ADB Vice President Chen Shixin, APCU President and my classmate Jeffrey Nam, PCCI Chairman George Barcelon, our partner in trade and industry. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. We would like to offer our warm greetings to the guests and participants of today's forum. We hope that everyone is keeping safe against the COVID-19 pandemic. Let me thank also the organizers, the Association of Philippine-China Understanding, APCU, and the Embassy of the People's Republic of China to the Philippines for the privilege of addressing your audience. Before anything else, I'd like to recognize the presence of my former boss and mentor when we were both younger in the earlier years of our career as technocrats at the Department of Trade and Industry in the 1980s, before she entered politics and before I joined the business sector. She is an esteemed economist and was a top-notch senator before becoming the Philippine president. Madam Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. Hello, ma'am. Great to see you again. I learned that she was also one of the founders of APCU and now serves as its chairperson emeritus. So let's give a big hand for our former Philippine President, Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. Thank you. Last year, our two nations marked the 45th anniversary of diplomatic relations. However, the roots of our trade and cultural bonds span longer than that, with Chinese merchants trading with their Filipino counterparts even before the Spanish arrived on our shores in the 16th century. And as our two countries deepened bilateral ties throughout the years, we saw this relationship grow and thrive during the time of then President Macapagal Arroyo. It was during the term also of Philippine President Rodrigo Roa Duterte and his independent foreign policy in 2016 that this relationship began to flourish again, like a profusion of flowers blossoming in the spring of renewed friendship, coming out after a cold winter. This strong bond of friendship was once again witnessed last Sunday with the arrival of the first batch of Sinovac COVID-19 vaccine donated by China. This donation, which the Chinese ambassador to the Philippines, Wang Xilian, worked hard for, thank you, Mr. Ambassador, and backed up by no less than Chinese President Xi Jinping, has brought much hope to the Filipino people. The arrival of the vaccine and the immediate rollout of the vaccination program the following day certainly brought about heightened optimism in seeing the beginning of the end of COVID-19 pandemic in the Philippines. This definitely lifted the spirits of many Filipinos and will surely lead to greater business and consumer confidence on the road to recovery. I earlier mentioned that Philippine-China ties date back centuries ago and is deeply rooted socially, culturally, and commercially. Chinese and Filipino-Chinese businesses have long been part of our society and economy. Many of the biggest conglomerates in almost all industries and their founders, who we refer to as Taipans, trace their roots from China. More recent investment from China in the Philippines that we can cite include the much talked about DITO Telecommunity, which is the country's incoming major telecom operator. There is also the APF Group Holding Corporation, producer of slabs and hot rolled coil in Misamis Oriental, and Florida Blanca Steel Industries, an export producer of steel pipes in Pampanga, the hometown of former President BGMA. Meanwhile, there is the Liangan Power Corporation, a renewable energy developer in Lanao del Norte, while Hydrocore is developing the Ibolao hydroelectric project in the Ifugao province. We would also like to cite the millions of Filipino-Chinese businesses in manufacturing and retail in the country, as well as several Filipino-Chinese communities in the Philippines with strong ties to their Filipino neighbors. In terms of trade, China is our country's top trading partner, our third largest export market, and our foremost import supplier. What's more, China is our second top investment partner for 2019 with the same ranking as of January to September 2020. The Chinese Ministry of Commerce, MOFCOM, also reported that during these last 3 years, project contracts signed by Chinese enterprises in the Philippines increased 27.9%, roughly 28% annually, with turnover increasing by 18.5% annually. In 2019, newly signed contracts were worth $6.4 billion with a growth of 102%. In 2020, newly signed contracts reached $9.6 billion, up by 54% year on year. But even with all these business deals, there are still a wide range of investment opportunities available in our country that investors can take advantage of presently. These include manufacturing of e-vehicles, e-bikes, bicycles, light industry manufacturing for connectivity devices, bags, and textile manufacturing, the Internet of Things, IoT, smart manufacturing, and AI, among so many other products and sectors. The Philippines has also been actively participating in China's major platforms to promote trade and investments, like the China International Import Expo, CIIE, which we participate right from the start. I think 2018, I was there physically. The China ASEAN Expo or CA-Expo, the China International Fair for Trade and Services or CIFTIS. In addition, we are the guest country of honor at the China International Fair for Investments and Trade, CIFID, for 2 years. Furthermore, our country has been taking an active role in the Belt and Road Initiative of President Xi Jinping. Even with the pandemic, we're looking forward to the convening of the 29th Philippines-China Joint Commission on Economic and Technical Cooperation at the soonest possible time this year through video conferencing. Plus, we have 4 Philippine trade and investment centers in China, Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, and Hong Kong, that can engage with Chinese enterprises pursuing going out strategies. As the world deals with COVID-19 pandemic, we wish to congratulate China on your economy's recovery and thanks to your quick response to the outbreak. Here in the Philippines, We're already seeing signs of economic recovery as we push for the gradual and calibrated reopening of our economy. Despite our GDP falling to minus 9.5% in 2020, being a pandemic year, we saw diminishing declines in the latter quarters of last year from a record low of negative 16.5% in the second quarter to negative 11.5% in the third quarter and negative 8.3% in the fourth quarter. Growth is seen quarter on quarter as GDP grew by 8% from second to third quarter and 5.6% from third to fourth quarter. Investments registered in our Board of Investment showed sustained growth of 156% year on year in the first 2 months, January, February of this year, reaching 121.9 billion pesos or about $2.5 billion in 2 months. The barometer for manufacturing activities, the PMI or the Philippine Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index, likewise showed a steady rebound in January and February, or January showing 52.5% of 52.5 index and remained unchanged in February at the same level of 52.5. Any number above 50 marks growth in the sector. This came from a huge decline at 31.6 index last April 2020 at the height of the lockdown. As our economy recovers, we are confident of achieving our pre-pandemic growth rates and beyond. To this end, we are facilitating greater trade and investment in the country by continuously pursuing reforms to foster a better business environment. That is why we have the game-changing Corporate Recovery and Tax Incentives for Enterprises Act, or CREATE, awaiting the signature of President Duterte, making the investment climate in the Philippines significantly more attractive. The CREATE bill will rationalize, modernize, and offer more relevant incentives to investors. Under the ratified version of the bill, qualified activities or projects can enjoy the incentives package for a maximum of 17 years. These include 4 to 7 years of income tax holiday, a 5% special corporate income tax rate based on gross income earned for 10 years in lieu of all national and local taxes, among others. Other key features of the bill that can be enjoyed by investors include the removal of export and nationality bias and the reduction of corporate income tax rate immediately from 30% to 25% for domestic corporations, foreign corporations, and non-resident foreign corporations. There is also the President's flexibility in granting incentives for highly desirable projects with minimum investment capital of 50 billion pesos or at least 10,000 job generation, but noting that total period of availment will not exceed 40 years. We also remain committed in supporting liberalization to enhance our country's competitiveness. This means amending laws like the Retail Trade Liberalization Act, the Foreign Investments Act, and the Public Services Act. Together with CREATE, these reforms and the review of other economic restrictions being conducted by members of Congress with the intention of removing barriers for entry will attract more investments and create more jobs in the Philippines. Lastly, as members of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP, China can strategically partner with the Philippines as we have a complementary comparative advantage to become a hub for innovation, R&D, and manufacturing, particularly in design and creativity-oriented products and services in the region. The Philippines can also become a center for education and training. Once the agreement becomes effective, RCEP is expected to boost intra-regional investment and trade, with ASEAN expected to play a vital role in this agreement. As the Chinese saying goes, faith brings people together from far apart. Our two nations continue to enjoy stronger trade and investment ties. Thus, we hope that you will partner with us to build back better towards a better and brighter post-COVID future. And through the jobs and employment generated by the business and investments you bring in, the Filipino people will also gain a more comfortable and higher quality of life, as promised by our President Rodrigo Roa Duterte. Thank you. Maraming salamat po. Shishi. And mabuhay po tayong lahat.
Thank you very much, Secretary Lopez. We would also like to acknowledge the presence of DTI Undersecretary Seferino Rodolfo in the audience. Now we are proud to present to you the distinguished President of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, Chin Lee Chin.
Thank you. The Honorable former President, Philippine President, Macapagal Arroyo, the Honorable Secretary Ramon Lopez of the Department of Trade and Industry of the Philippines, Deputy Secretary General of ASEAN COMPAR, Asian Development Bank Vice President Chen Shixin, APCU Chairman Paul Lamido, and APCU President Jeffrey Knapp. It gives me great honor to take part in this inaugural forum where two nations cooperate to overcome a common threat. That threat comes in the form of a virus that is infecting our people and our economy. COVID-19 has wreaked havoc on nations and economies worldwide. The pandemic suddenly changed our world in 2020. It lifted the veil on the cracks in many global systems. No region and no country could have escaped this pandemic. Asia as a whole has been pummeled by the pandemic. However, there are signs of a tentative recovery, although at different speeds. The outlook varies by country, depending on infection rates, containment measures, policy responses, and external demand. China is now recovering fairly fast, and it's hoped that China's growth can help boost the growth of other ASEAN countries due to the region's close trade and cross-border relationship. It's also expected that RCEP can play its role in promoting regional cooperation and development. COVID-19 exposed our weaknesses and shed light on the gaps in crucial areas of our economic and social development, particularly in healthcare. The health sector stood out as the weakest link in our global economic system. Decades of underfunding in both developing and developed countries has led to the crippling of our neglected sector, that is, healthcare system, either globally or individually. Lockdowns were enforced across the globe to lighten the demand on healthcare workers and healthcare infrastructure. The international community has learned the lesson the hard way. Faced with the human suffering, AIIB lost no time in providing vitally important financing to those countries in need. The bank's agility, adaptability, responsiveness have been well recognized by the client members. We have been doing something extraordinary under the extraordinary circumstances. We are resilient and have maximized the use of technology. More importantly, we partnered even more with the global community to help revive the economy. As part of the global community fighting COVID-19, AIIB has been doing what was not expected just a year ago, providing massive budgetary support and policy lending to our client members in their efforts to save lives and bring the pandemic under control. This is our priority over the course of 2020, and even we have leveraged our systems to ensure timely delivery of assistance. We needed to go beyond our bank's existing framework to help our members fight this unprecedented global crisis. This meant the introduction of new instruments and co-financing mechanisms in a very short period of time. Our clients are very pleased with the flexibility of our response to the immediate needs of our members as they faced complex health and financial challenges brought about by the pandemic. In April 2020, we launched the AIIB Crisis Recovery Facility to the order of 13 billion US dollars of financing to both public and private sector entities. This financing assistance would be offered to any AIIB members facing or at risk of facing serious adverse impacts as a result of COVID-19. These funds can be used for financing immediate health sector needs, such as development of health system capacity and the provision of essential medical equipment and supplies to combat COVID-19. They also are used to promote economic resilience and mitigate the impact on AIIB's members' economies. This includes not just investments in infrastructure, but also social and economic protection to prevent long-term damage to the productive capacity of the economy. The funds also address liquidity constraints for clients in infrastructure and other productive sectors to maintain critical long-term investments that may have to be curtailed, delayed, or suspended in absence of AIIB's financing. Our bank's crisis recovery facility enabled us to work with other MDBs, private partner institutions, and other financiers to respond to the economic, financial, and healthcare challenges created by COVID-19. Since April 2020, AIIB has approved 29 projects under the facility to help 20 AIIB members navigate these highly uncertain times. These projects represent $7.55 billion out of the available $13 billion approved by our board of directors. Out of that $7.55 billion, $5.77 billion have already been dispersed to our members in need of assistance as of the end of February 2021. These figures show that during the crisis, we have been responding to our members' needs with newfound agility. AIIB's Crisis Recovery Facility has helped in no small measure our client countries overcome immediate financial pressure and maintain crucial long-term investments that otherwise would not have been possible. Similar assistance reached the shores of the Philippines. As part of a coordinated international effort, AIIB approved a $750 million loan to the Philippines to stave off the worst public health and economic effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Co-financed with the Asian Development Bank, this budgetary support will go towards increasing the government's testing capacity, bolstering vulnerable sectors, including agriculture, and providing conditional cash transfers and emergency assistance to poor households. Additionally, at least 1 million micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, of which 58% are registered to women, will benefit from wage subsidies. A second similar project, co-financed by AIIB and the Asian Development Bank, is being developed, this time aimed at helping the Philippine government rapidly procure eligible COVID-19 vaccines. AIIB is exploring a loan up to $300 million to provide critically needed vaccines to assist the Philippines in vaccinating its people and mitigating the pandemic's adverse health, social, and economic effects. In general, AIIB's COVID-19 assistance was meant for vulnerable countries, vulnerable businesses, vulnerable people. That is why we are also mindful of our borrowers' financial health and vulnerability to debt. We protect the welfare and financial sustainability of our members. We aim to finance infrastructure for tomorrow. Infrastructure that is environmentally, economically, and socially sustainable. This includes debt sustainability as an integral part of our financing consideration. It is clear that a post-COVID-19 world will be far more heavily indebted than before. This is why more needs to be done. Innovative solutions are needed to bolster the debt sustainability of nations. Blending with concessional finance has become an increasingly important funding modality as we look for financing solutions. Meanwhile, AMDB's efforts to de-risk and crowd in private sector investment will become increasingly important as government's fiscal capacities are constrained. As we look to the future, we must recognize that a post-COVID-19 world will present unforeseen challenges. It is clear that AMDBs will have to play a crucial role if we are to drive sustainable recovery from this crisis. AMDBs need to broaden and deepen practical cooperation to jointly achieve an early revival of the economy. Moving forward, AIIB will be there to help our members and clients build stronger healthcare systems so they will be better prepared. We will facilitate cross-border investments so that neighbors can work together rather than shutting each other out. We will inject liquidity into the economic system to support infrastructure and other productive sectors in navigating negative economic shocks. We will do this by unlocking new capital, new technologies, and new ways in which to address climate change and to connect Asia and the world. COVID-19 is a roadblock to world growth and recovery. We do not stand still. The anticipated post-pandemic shift back towards our mainstream financing is already underway, and we are preparing to ramp up our business as economies recover. We will actively look for opportunities to pursue certain objectives that we have enshrined in our first corporate strategy, which was approved in 2020, the same year COVID-19 changed our world. For example, we will continue enabling clients to build infrastructure for tomorrow, green infrastructure with sustainability, innovation, and connectivity at its core. For the sustainable development of the planet, it's crucial for the world's recovery to prioritize new, greener ways to do business. We will facilitate the financing and the creation of infrastructure to empower regions and their people with access to physical, digital, and social services. We hope that this, in turn, will contribute to local, regional, and global sustainability and economic growth after COVID-19. This is our commitment for the coming years. We will inject liquidity into the economy and stand by our members during the trials of COVID-19. We will help spur the economy through infrastructure for tomorrow. We will take this journey with our development partners and our members like China and the Philippines as we head toward economic recovery from the pandemic and into a post-COVID-19 world. The Philippines is a founding member of the bank. It has remained a great partner in good standing. I'm looking forward to continue the cooperation with this beautiful country and hospitable people. My life of 5 years in the Philippines forged in me a deep attachment to the country. I'm so happy to be able to work for this country in my new capacity and in a new way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Jim, for your wonderful speech. Filipinos have seldom listened to a high-ranking former Chinese official, such as you, speak such impeccable English. You have spent 10 years in the rural province during the Cultural Revolution, when all the universities were closed, yet you finished with a Master of Arts in English at the Beijing Foreign Language University, same school as Ambassador Huang, and later at the Boston University. May we know what prompted you to take up English in the first place?
I'm learning English from you. Thank you very much. I think it's an interesting question. As you know, English is lingua franca. It's a means of communication among the peoples of the whole world. And actually, when I was a teenager, the English language was offered in the schools, and a few people at that time were interested in learning English. Not like today. The whole country is mad about learning English, right? And it's a huge English language teaching is a huge industry in China. Now, because people understand the importance of communicating the rest of the world, of working with the peoples of other countries. Now, indeed, actually, Philippines have a great advantage of being an English-speaking country, even though you have your local language, which is important. But the English language proficiency really helped the Philippine people to work overseas, to improve the investment in your country by attracting multinationals working in your country. Indeed, this is one of the very important factors why Philippines has been doing very well, attracting multinationals and to promote economic development in your country. So I think this is very much important. But what I want to highlight is while learning English, we keep our own languages in our mind because our own culture in each and every country is so important. English is a language for many countries, for many peoples, is something which is helpful, but I think it can work well with our native languages so that people can communicate with the outside world and also enjoy the rich heritage of your history, such as the Philippines. Thank you.
Thank you, President Jim. You have translated your friend Ron Chernow's book, The House of Morgan, An American Banking Dynasty and the Rise of Modern Finance into Chinese. And you have read his books on Ulysses Grant and Alexander Hamilton. You also wrote a book, Economic Development, Theories and Practices. You have worked at the World Bank in Washington, D.C. for many years in 1980. You are now the face of a modern, confident China in the world stage. What is your impression of the United States and its very recent change of attitude towards China?
Thank you, Jeffrey. I lived in the United States for 7 years altogether, and in addition to frequent visits to the US for international conferences, meetings with the US officials, and for some other kind of events. I think the United States is a country which has a reason to be a superpower. The American people have lots to feel proud of the nation. Americans have rich historical heritage, even though it has a history of less than 300 years. And this is what you can learn by reading quite a number of important books on the United States, such as the history of the United States and the history of the American people, including certainly Ron Chernow's book on George Washington and House of Morgan, Hamilton, and many others. And there are also great men of letters who recorded the history, the people's lives with their own emotions in the background of this beautiful country. So Americans have a right to feel proud of it, and Americans certainly are very much ambitious to keep leading the rest of the world. The problem is the Americans should understand that other nations are also catching up. And the only way to keep the leading position is by working harder rather than to stop others from improving, stop others from running, right? So you see, for a big nation, it is a little bit difficult to adjust to the changed situations, such as when China is growing up, Asia is growing up. In 1920, when I was having a meeting in Washington, it's called a Track 2 Dialogue between China and the United States, and we had the honor to have breakfast meeting with the then former Vice President Joe Biden. And I still remember the Vice President Joe Biden said, I'm Irish, I love Irish poetry. And then he started to quote W.B. Yeats, That was the poem of Easter 1916. And he quoted, "All changed utterly, a terrible beauty has been born." So I like WB Yes also, right? So I asked him a question. I said, Mr. Vice President, by the definition of Webster's dictionary, terrible does not mean horrible. It could mean awesome, could mean formidable, could be daunting. So do you think the United States is prepared to adjust itself to the changed world? Globalization, its impact on the different sectors in the United States, China's rise, and also the Asians' rise. These are all the new phenomena, and all this could be both the blessing and also a challenge for a great nation like the United States. Certainly, the Vice President, Joe Biden, was very confident, and he talked a lot about the way the United States and American people or government could handle. But when it comes to real issues, it's always very hard. It's always very hard to discuss these kind of issues. For instance, when I was attending the luncheon hosted by the former Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, and there were Larry Summers and quite some number of people. And I also raised this issue. I said, you see, the Americans blamed the Chinese for loss of jobs. And what if China stops exporting to the United States? Do you think the American manufacturers could get back their business? The answer is no. And indeed, China is contributing in a very different way because China keeps the money of the trade surplus in the United States so that you don't have to print the money, right? So otherwise, the Triffin dilemma would be a real problem. So we had this kind of exchanges, and I think the communication dialogue is helpful. So once again, we see the change in the United States. I would say probably a lot of more American people come to their senses. They understand how they should deal with a changed world. I would say that a very good dialogue, very good conversation between the leaders of the two countries is certainly important, but also the exchanges of the people to people exchange is also important, and also more important, particularly, I think the businesses. So I look forward, I think I'm very much optimistic because before 1972, China-US relationship was in the Ice Age. There's such kind of acrimony, hostility. You could not possibly imagine this kind of exchanges after President Nixon visited China. Now it seems to be yet another hit by cold wave, but I think it's much better than before 1972. So let me stop here, and I think this is an interesting question, and both countries need to address.
Thank you, President Xi. You were already chairman of the China International Capital Corporation, a major Chinese investment bank in Beijing in October 2014. And yet, you agreed to help establish AIIB. May we know if it was a difficult decision?
You see, I served in the World Bank and ADB. I was on the board of the World Bank and ADB as the vice president. Those years, more than a decade, was very much helpful to me to be exposed to multilateralism, to be exposed to the running and management of the multilateral development institutions. And China joined the World Bank and IMF in 1980. In 1983, my first visit to the Philippines was to attend the 11th International Auditing Conference. And I had the opportunity to meet your former president, leaders at that time in 1983, and also I had the meetings with the then president of the ADB. So over those years, China has benefited from the multilateral development bank, benefited from the bilateral support. 40 years later, the question posed to the Chinese government is how could China reciprocate support to the other international members of the international community? So President Xi proposed the initiative of setting up the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. And China kicked off the negotiation first with the ASEAN countries, and Philippines, an active player throughout the whole process. Now, 7 years later, we are already 5 years into operation. And I think this new bank created in the 21st century has demonstrated its role. Contrary to the expectation of a lot of people, this bank does not undercut the existing institutions like the World Bank, like ADB, or other institutions. I think it was a pleasant surprise to a lot of people that this bank has actually worked very well with the sister institutions. So we're very happy to work co-finance with the World Bank, co-finance with ADB in supporting the Philippines and many other countries in ASEAN region. So it's very good. And we have won over a lot of skeptics, a lot of people who had huge questions whether this is a China bank. But if people look at the way the bank is being managed, look at the way the senior positions are filled, look at the way we help the member countries, I think people in their right mind should acknowledge that this is a bona fide international multilateral institution. Let me stop here.
Thank you, President Chin. ADB is right here in Manila. You spent 5 years as Vice President in ADB. May we know the niche or competitive difference of AIIB over ADB?
I enjoy my 5 years as Vice President in ADB, and I love this institution because I'm always very proud. I was one of the 2 people who had the first meeting with the ADB, the former president. And that was in 1983, as I said. And ADB has served the region very well. China started to negotiate with the ADB about its membership, I think from 1986, but it became a member later on. I think we have learned a lot from ADB, and ADB has contributed substantially to the development in China as well as many other countries. But you see, this bank, our bank, is created in the 21st century with a mandate slightly different from that of ADB for the purpose of complementarity. ADB's overarching objective is poverty reduction, which is a laudable objective. And the World Bank also spent a lot of money on poverty reduction and the social sector. The question faced by us in creating this bank is, what is the role this new bank is going to play? As you say, what is the niche? So we conceptualize this bank, keeping in mind that overall, the multilateral development banks have the mandate which would more or less overlap each other, which is to promote economic and social development. All of these banks would support infrastructure. But because of a different focus, so the World Bank and ADB will not have sufficient resources to focus on infrastructure and other productive sectors. So we intended to create a bank which does not aim at poverty reduction as the overarching objective. Instead, we aim at broad-based social and economic development through investment in infrastructure and other productive sectors. So in this way, we can help reduce poverty by improving the overall wealth accumulation of a country. And this was experience of China, of many ASEAN countries. Building infrastructure paved the path for sustained growth. So we focus on infrastructure and other productive sectors. Now, during the negotiation, people asked me, because I was the Secretary General of the interim multilateral secretariat, and they said, Mr. Jin, what do you mean by other productive sectors? Because I added these words in the draft of the Articles of Agreement. I said, the other productive sectors means other productive sectors. You don't know what you are going to do. But I was very clear in my mind. You simply cannot build physical infrastructure, roads, airports, seaports, power plants, transmission lines. They're all important. They are physical. How about non-physical kind of thing? So you have physical hardware. How about software? And at that time, I said healthcare and education are productive sectors, because only a healthy nation could be productive. So 2 or 3 years into operation, I already proposed to the board we should support healthcare. Few people believed this is our job. Now, after COVID-19 outbreak, everybody believes supporting healthcare as the other productive sector is important. So we learn from the ADB, we learn from the World Bank, we also try to contribute in a new way.
Thank you, President Jin. As the president of a multilateral financial institution, what does multilateralism mean to you? In your opinion, how should we uphold and practice multilateralism under the present circumstance?
Multilateralism means a lot to me as an international civil servant. Multilateralism means a lot to the people of all of these countries in this world. As you know, multilateralism was born out of the United Nations and the Bretton Woods institutions. Prior to the end of the World War II, there were lots of regional conflicts and culminating in the global war, World War. And then people came to their senses, they understand we need to have a system which could help us to sit down together and talk out of some of the differences. That's a wonderful idea, but United Nations focused more on the resolution of political issues, whereas Bretton Woods on the financial and economic issues. So multilateralism started to play its role from the late 1940s. You see, we have, relatively speaking, enjoyed a very stable global situation over the last 7 decades, in spite of some skirmishes between countries, in spite of some of the regional conflicts. But all in all, the major powers, bigger countries are more rational. They could sit down and work out the differences. But with the increased technology and connectivity and transportation, that world is really too small. You cannot work on your own. Gone are the days when a nation can sit snugly in the valley of the mountains and sustain itself. No way, this is gone. The people would have to work together, countries would have to work together. And they see the huge benefit accruing to all these participating nations by working together. Mutual investment, cross-border investment, trade. So it's obvious, but we are also aware of the side effects of the multilateralism. A multilateral approach is not panacea. It cannot solve all of the problems. It may even leave some side effects in its wake. What is the way to deal with that. It's not to throw multilateralism overboard. It is to fix the side effects as we move forward. So in another word, globalization has contributed substantially, but it also has problems. But in a nutshell, I would say multilateralism or globalization calls for two things. One, a country should be actively participate in international cooperation to get the most of the benefit. Secondly, the government should not relax its efforts to improve the restructuring of the economy, redistribution of the income. Now take the United States, for example. The US lost some of these manufacturing sectors lower end. It's impossible and it's not desirable for US try to reshoring those industries back. And going back to the making of socks, garments, it's not what the United States should do. How about the lost jobs? They should redistribute the income. And overall, as the US has more income. But I think one of the worst, effects of such a kind of protectionism or headwind against globalization is that they would misguide the younger generation. If you protect excessively certain sectors, sunset sector, which has no future, you are misguiding the young generation that there's still career future in this kind of sector, which is not right. That's why I think we should show people the roadmap. How do you move forward? How you build up your technology competitiveness, and then you can get the most benefit from the multilateral approach.
Thank you, President Chin. AIIB is operating on lean, clean, and green principles. Can you elaborate on what clean means for AIIB and AIIB's stand on corruption?
You see, I think anti-corruption is key. We believe for a multilateral development bank to be sustainable, to have sustained trust from its members and to maintain its credibility. Anti-corruption is the key. So we have zero tolerance for corruption. There are two ways we deal with that. First, we keep our own house in order. We will not corruption, cheating, fraud to happen to our institution. For instance, how about corporate procurement? We should make it clear, very clear to everyone that the corporate procurement should be free of corruption. How about human resources development? Now, in some of the institutions, you buy your money up the ladder, right? Some people just pay for a higher position. This is absolutely impossible in our institution. The other aspect is related to the procurement, the international competitive bidding. When we finance the project in some of these countries, I think we should help them understand that the money must go to the right place. Otherwise, we would put the company of the wrongdoing company on the blacklist. So we have already sanctioned some of the companies which violated our anti-corruption rules. So this is very much important. And then I think the image is important, and we will just keep our image unspoiled. Thank you.
Thank you, President Chin. Before it was over borrowing from the IMF World Bank. Now, how can you assure country borrowers such as the Philippines from falling into a so-called debt trap?
That's a very good question. I actually started to deal with the debt problems in the international institutions from the 1980s. You all remember in 1980, Mexico had its debt crisis, followed by quite a number of Latin American countries. That was the year when China started to borrow from the World Bank, from international capital markets. So some people in China raised the question, are you crazy? borrowing from the foreign money to put the money on the dirt, which means to build the roads. How can the road give you back the foreign exchange to repay the debt? So there was serious debate with regard to the desirability or the wisdom of borrowing from outside when Mexico and other Latino countries were already in deep trouble. But I'm happy to see that those who are for the borrowings prevail. And we started to borrow. 4 decades later, 5 decades, you see, China has never, ever had debt problems, in spite of the huge amount of resources China has introduced into the country. So the answer is borrowing money from outside or incur external debt is not necessarily the source of debt problem. It's not the borrowing that created the debt problems. It's the use of the proceeds of the debt. It's the use of the borrowed money that matters, that makes or breaks. So over the last 4 decades, debt problem, debt overhang have never ceased to be a problem. So we are still grappling with this problem, but there are very good examples. I think we should look at the success stories and to learn a lesson from some of the failures. So we attach great importance to the use of the resources from the debt, put them to the productive sectors, making sure that all this money would be used effectively and the project should be implemented on schedule so that you can start to have revenues without delay. So my view is, when the historical lessons in mind, we are helping the countries to understand how they can utilize these external resources most judiciously, wisely, and I'm sure they can move out of the debt trap step by step. Thank you.
Thank you, President Chin. One last question. How would you measure the success of AIIB, and what would you like your legacy to be in AIIB?
I think we are working with the board about the so-called scorecard. What are the successes? And we want to have a very simple and a straightforward scorecard, which can show how much we have achieved and where is the room for improvement. I don't want to spend a huge amount of resources for this, going to the very detailed kind of things which may not make a lot of sense. But at least we can try to build up a kind of matrix to understand, for instance, how many countries we have supported, how many projects we have supported, to what extent we have improved the economy, the living standard of the people of the country. And it is not that hard for us to get information by working with the government. And more important, for instance, how much we have done in achieving gender balance, in empowering women, in improving the status of women in their economies. And also we would try to see how much we have contributed to the climate change mitigation. And for instance, how much we have done to promote renewable energy and saving the fossil fuel. So we could have a kind of matrix, and it could be very much revealing, but without getting bogged down to the too detailed kind of things. So this is very much important for us. And secondly, I think I regard this as my very important legacy, which is to make a multilateral development bank to be able to sustain itself on the capital base without going back to the shareholders asking for money again and again and again. So distinguishing feature of this bank is that this bank should be able to stand on its own feet by expanding its capital base through cost-effective management, through rational, reasonable returns, and some other kind of innovative ways. So I told the negotiating countries, I said, we want to have a bank which is different from the existing institutions. This is no reflection on the management of existing institutions because they were created 7 decades ago, half a century ago. We are created in the digital era. We are created in the 21st century. We should have different models of branding. That is why I propose lean, clean, and green, right? So stay lean. We can make the best use of resources. I don't want to waste the resources. And we have some other kind of ways to expand our capital base. I can promise, as long as we stay in the course, we don't have to go back to the Philippines, to China, to Germany. Hey, give me capital because we are running out of capital. That is the outdated modality of managing a multilateral development bank. So we have a new kind of governance. We don't have the resident board. The resident board would account for 20% of the budget. And worse, resident board would have to be serviced by a large team. You recruit lots of people to serve the resident board. We have a non-resident board, just like the private sector companies. The board members meet physically 4 times a year until 2020, right? But we could have digital virtual meetings, having board meetings. That can save us a lot of money. So there are many ways to make a multilateral development bank sustain itself financially without going back to the shareholders asking for money repeatedly. So this is something very important. And I'm I was a part of the core team to design this new bank. But I want to say, without my experience working in the World Bank and ADB, without looking and reviewing the experience of EBRD and other institutions, I could not have possibly come up with some of these ideas.
Thank you very much, President Sin, for this very enlightening open forum. Now for our closing remarks, can we call on APCO Chairman, Secretary Raul Lambino.
Thank you, President Jeffrey, former Philippine President and Chairperson Emeritus of APCO, Her Excellency Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, His Excellency Ambassador Wang Xilian of the Chinese Embassy, Honorable President Jin Likun of the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, Secretary Ramon Lopez of the Department of Trade and Industry, ASEAN Deputy Secretary General Kong Fuok, Asian Development Bank Vice President Chen Sijin, guests, and other participants. The first Manila Forum for Philippines-China Relations, organized by APCO in cooperation with the Chinese Embassy in Manila, marks a new milestone in our two nations' quest for development and progress. I am honored to speak at the conclusion of so important a gathering of leaders, listening to their wise speeches that give us hope for economic recovery after the COVID-19 pandemic. I have asked myself often, in the midst of the prolonged lockdowns and quarantines because of COVID-19 and the consequence of lost jobs, stalled growth, and appended development plans, which way is the right path to nurse our economies back to robust health? It has to begin somewhere, and the obvious start is by checking the spread of the coronavirus and achieving herd immunity for our populations through mass vaccinations and the continuing practice of strict health protocols. At this juncture, we would like to thank China for the donation of the vaccine. And then what comes next? The obvious answer is that alone. We cannot achieve a quick or modest recovery because the slowdown is already deep and painful to begin. That brings up the second part of the answer, which for now is the most critical element of recovery. And that is, we need a partner or partners who are in better shape than we are and who see us as a good neighbor and friend, and with the declared desire to boost mutual understanding, mutual respect, and mutual trust, quote unquote. Not too long ago, at a conference in Beijing centered on the One Belt, One Road initiative of Chinese President Xi Jinping, there was a statement by one of the global leaders in attendance, short but remarkably powerful, that touched on the significance of China's project to build a modern 21st century version of ancient Silk Road. The remark was made by the managing director of the International Monetary Fund, Christine Lagarde, who said, and I quote, "It is about connecting culture. It is about connecting communities. It is about enriching economies and improving the standard of living of people." The key phrases here are connecting communities and enriching economies. When we connect to each other, it means we are together in this. And what is good for one is good for the other. I think that is multilateralism. It is a vision so epic in scale that not 3 years after the conference in Beijing on China's drive to build land and seek connections to its neighbors, the Oxford global historian Peter Frankopan writes that over 80 countries are now part of the initiative encompassing 63% of the world's population and 29% of its global output. While it is revealing that China has taken this road, it is not altogether surprising, and the answer can be found embedded in China's ancient history. In a declaration made more than 2 millennia ago by the king of Shao in northeastern China, who said, and I quote, that a talent for following the ways of yesterday is not sufficient to improve the world of today, unquote. Peter Frankopan's latest book, The New Silk Roads, which supplied this quotation, recognizes China's strength from the fact that it is attuned to a changing world. So too are we in the Philippines. But by no means are we alone in the region in forging ahead with the thinking about how to prepare for the future. There are states, as Frankopan observes, that have developed blueprints setting out the opportunities and challenges in the short and medium term, along with analysis of how best to cope with this. Among the examples he cited include states so close to the Philippines, Vietnam with its 2 corridors and 1 economic circle initiative, and Laos, Cambodia, and Myanmar with their development plans. Of course, the vision of our country is President Rodrigo Roa Duterte's Build Infrastructure initiative. And it is a grand and epic as any in Southeast Asia, considering the chronic infrastructure deficit for decades that the Philippines is coming from. It is forward-looking strategy, one that has propelled the country forward in terms of who we are, our national identity, and what we can achieve together as a nation, our place in the community of nations. Our forum today is remarkably timely as the first of its kind, but more than that, it is our own initiative in finding a way to boost our connections with China via investments in infrastructure. At this juncture, and as chairman of APCO, may I take this opportunity to mention about my proposal to build the Pangasinan-Nueva Ecija Expressway coming from the town of Bulinaw to the city of San Jose in Nueva Ecija. It's a 180-kilometer stretch of new highway to be built. The project is now with the National Economic Development Authority and with the Department of Public Works and Highways. I just received confirmation letter from Secretary Carl Chua that my proposal is now with the Asian Development Bank. We live in a dangerous time of setbacks, but also a time of generous opportunities to build back and rebuild quickly with a partner not only is a good neighbor, but a friend. We recognize, as China clearly does, how economic stagnation can be dangerously fatal since it unjustly punishes our people to remain mired in generational poverty, even as it drives them deeper in the land of no return, in the arms of unwinnable insurgencies and violent extremism. China, with the AIIB, has the vision with its Belt and Road Initiative. And most important of all, it has the money to realize that vision. And that's the difference between stagnation and progress. I hope President Jin can help us construct the first Pangasinan Nueva Ecija Expressway. This is an idea we take home from this forum, and it is our hope that our leaders will build upon it, will strive to expand it, and will explore other parts to enrich it. Thank you, and mabuhay.
Thank you, APCO Chairman Raul. We are now concluding the first Manila Forum on Philippine-China relations. Watch out for our second Manila Forum soon. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
完了吧？还可以说吗？现在说不了吧？好，没事没事没事。好，这样不好那个什么了，行吧？这样啊，再见，谢谢啊。嘿嘿。